Like, what's the difference between a soul and a mind?
Yeah, so your mind is like your logic. So you asked me to come on this podcast, and I could have done it without praying about it. I could have just been like, yeah, it'll be fun, stretch my brain. It'll get me moving for the day. It'll be creative outlet for me. The soul is like, how does my creator get the glory? How does my soul settle with having a conversation with another person who has the spirit of the living God with him? And how do I extract the holy wisdom and the holy ambition from this person? And so,
man, that's powerful. Welcome everyone to episode, what are we on now? Episode 7 of the Inspire Challenge podcast. I'm your host, Devahntau Colonel. With me today, I have a man of spiritual excellence, of physical athleticism, the beast on the volleyball court. Joining me today, I have Mr. Kaleb Pickle.
Devahntau, thanks for that intro. I don't know if I'm all those things, but I might be a beast on the volleyball court.
Oh yeah. You don't want this man spiking in your face, people. Don't do it, I promise you.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Pickle, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Yeah, so my name is Kaleb. I am on staff at a church in Orlando, Journey Christian Church, where I am serving as our elementary coordinator at one of our campuses. Beautiful place, beautiful, sweet season to be in as a someone learning ministry, someone who wants to do ministry as a career, and someone who wants to pursue the Lord in that aspect. I've been on staff for about 1.5 years now. It's my first real big job, I guess, if you want. I graduated high school, and in the summer I was a little bit confused as to what I wanted to do, and the Lord kind of showed me exactly what he wanted to do when he opened up this opportunity to be with this church. And I was like, Lord, if this is what you're asking me and leading me to, then may I be obedient to that. And the Lord gave a lot of clarity and a lot of peace within that decision. And, here I am, keep listening and trying to obey the Lord. That's my goal, I guess, in life.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And it's so funny hearing you say that 1.5 years ago you started, because that's exactly when I started too.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. So you were actually coming in, and I was coming in, learning some things, and our mutual friend asked us, she brought you in, and I was like, oh, this guy, he sounds pretty cool. She was telling me about you, and I was like, let's do it. I'm going to go have a conversation with him. And we talked about baptism. Because I know that you and this person had been having a lot of conversation and whatnot. And I was like, we had sushi bowls.
Sushi, love it.
And it was so good, man. I had, it was a beautiful conversation where maybe I talked a little bit too much.
Oh, no.
And
I was enthralled.
And you just had great questions. Like, what is baptism? What happens when we're baptized? What does it mean after we're baptized? And you just wanted to know. And maybe I provided answers, maybe not. Maybe you're confused. I don't know. We'll revisit that another day over some sushi bowls. But yeah, so I think that's the first time we met. I've met you a little, we've kind of hung out here and there before. And then the first time I got to know your story and know you a little bit more in depth was sushi bowls. So the moral of the story is sushi bowls brings people together.
Sushi is the food of community, people.
Yeah.
So indulge in some sushi and get around a circle.
Definitely so.
So I know nowadays you're working in the church with the church, but let's rewind it a couple years and how did you come out of high school and find yourself as an 18-year-old and you're like, I'm going to work at a church? What does that look like and build up to look like for you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I didn't grow up in the church. And we grew up in a Catholic church, and we occasionally stopped at Easter and Christmas, but we weren't necessarily involved with the church. I don't think I can recall being able to tell you what it was that we we're about as the church, especially the Catholic Church. I didn't know their values, their what they were going after, what this meant, what did this offer to everyone. More specifically, how does this play out in my life? And I kind of, when I grew up to have the decision to go to church or not, I didn't choose it because it hadn't proved anything in my life except that it would take up another few hours of my day when I had sports and I had school and I had a job. So it wasn't like it was something that it was going to be beneficial or worth carving out time for. And, that's kind of how I lived a lot of my life is if it wasn't worth it, then I'm not going to find time for it. And I kind of, since I was in sports, my community was my sports team. And we didn't really have a lot of, I would say, good community. We kind of led each other into doing some silly decisions and some things that we probably aren't super proud of anymore. Just immature things of, even just like the language that we use to talk about people. And, it led to some, I'd say a lot, for me at least, a lot of guilt and a lot of shame that I didn't really understand or how, or even like know what the next step was, how to solve it. And I was in sophomore year of high school, and I had a friend. So I showed up late when I had been going to this school for since my entire high school career, so these few years now, and I had gotten a class switch and I got lost. I don't know how I got lost. I mean,
wait, you got lost in school?
The high school is big. Like it's a big campus.
Okay, that's fair.
It'll take you about 10 minutes to walk to one side to the other. And I got lost, and I showed up to class super late, and because I had to walk to the front office and be like, "Hey, I've been going here forever now, but can you tell me where this is at?" And so I showed up late, and there was one seat left in the class, and it was right next to someone who I knew, but I didn't know much about them, and so I sat down and I said, "Hey man, like how are you? Like, hey, my name's Kaleb, if you don't remember." And I'm actually an introvert, so like that was a lot. And being late, people thinking about like, oh, who's this guy, and watching me take a seat and stuff.
Wait, sorry, was this in the middle of the school year, or was this like the first day of
It was around the
class?
first few days of school. It was like the first quarter, so the first 9 weeks.
And this was of sophomore year. Okay, same school that you'd been going to.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And so I introduced myself, and he invited me to his home church, and it was like the first actual conversation we had because we ran track in middle school together.
Oh wow!
And he invited me to this home church that he did. It was a Bible study type deal, and he was like, "There's pizza." And I'm like, if I got pizza and if I got a ride, I've got nothing else going on tonight on a Monday night. But if I got pizza and a ride, because I couldn't drive, I'll be there. And he's like, "Well, I've got both."
Oh, nice.
And so he picked me up and he asked me a little bit like, "What do you believe?" And I was like, I don't really know. I guess I believe in Christ, but I couldn't tell you who he is. And I started attending that all of my sophomore year of high school, and it turned out to be like this beautiful experience for me where I got to learn about the gospel. And this particular friend of mine, he kind of he was a grade older than me, so a year older than me as well, and he was sort of like an older brother that I have an older brother, yes, but it was more of like this guy was involved with my life heavily, and he reviewed the model of discipleship and then literally just applied it to my life. And
That's awesome.
he taught me scripture. He taught me even emotional maturity, like, hey, you shouldn't be talking about people like that. You shouldn't be like yelling out in Target, just screaming randomly. Maybe just not do that. And he's like still to this day like one of my best friends, and someone who's going to be with me at my wedding and someone who's going to be with me at my funeral. He's a beautiful soul, and so that's how I learned a lot of that. And he brought me actually to where I'm at now at Journey, and it was the first time I've ever had an experience of worship like that. And I was like, this is really cool. It's a beautiful facility. It's what they do here, what they're going after is really clear. It's something that I can understand. And they had a youth group, so I was involved with their youth group. And I guess as the more I got involved, the more I started serving. So I started serving in a middle school as like a small group leader, assistant, I guess, because I wasn't like adding to the conversation. I was just kind of listening. Like, thank the Lord I didn't have enough to say then, because oh my goodness. So I'm still learning all these things, and I started serving in kids ministry as well. When we had a Saturday night service, so I would serve on a Saturday night. I would go to service. We had 2 services on Sunday morning too, so I would go to a service and then I'd serve at our middle school service.
Awesome.
So I was just like really plugged in, and the more I got to know our student pastor, the more like he sort of developed me too. When I found out I really wanted to go in ministry, which happened actually at a camp when the Lord called me to student ministry. So I was going into my junior year of high school, and the Lord called me into ministry then. It wasn't like super clear or anything, but I just knew I didn't hear the voice of the Lord. I was like, man, I'd love to do ministry one day. And like I had so much peace about like saying that out loud in front of like my student pastor. I was like, this is just the Lord. Like I've never felt like pressure off my shoulders or like over my chest. So that's how I got like called into ministry. And I guess it really started when I would pick up trash after student ministry in the parking lot and in our facility. And I would just do it, and I was just like, and I did it well. Like I did not leave a single piece of trash out.
Oh man!
And then it kind of evolved into putting up the student pastor's podium or stand from which they'll preach off of. Just putting it on stage during like the transition videos or whatever. And then it kind of evolved to like praying over the speaker for whoever might be speaking that day in student ministry. And then it kind of moved into large adult worship. I'd pray over that speaker. And then it would kind of evolve. Like the more I grew in relationships and that relational equity aspect, they would invite me, hey, like we have this opportunity for you to do ministry. Like, what do you think? And that was another place in my life where I felt like really peaceful. And I don't know, I guess the Lord speaks a lot through me, through peace, I guess logic in a sense. So that's how I winded up here.
That's awesome. And it's so interesting. You said the Lord speaks to you through peace. That is I know for myself, I have different ways that I like look for signs of things, or I look for certain confirmation. And for me, I look for things in threes. So that's interesting that for you, yours is, what is my resolution of peace? Where's my state of that at?
Yeah. So the word for that is actually shalom. And I think a lot of us think of peace as like, oh, I understand. Oh, that makes sense. Like I have peace within me. Peace be with you. Like, may you be safe, is essentially what they're saying when they say that. But I don't know. I think peace, when we speak of it in terms of like, man, I got peace. Like, man, I really trust the Lord here. I really understand that the Lord spoke to me, and that He gave me this opportunity or this word of knowledge or wisdom or prophecy. And, what am I going to do with that? I ought to obey it, because if I'm not obeying, the prompting of the Holy Spirit or of the Lord, then where is that going to lead to? Yeah, it's not going to lead to happy thoughts or shalom. It won't lead to shalom. Like being in God's will is peace. It is shalom. And if I'm away from that, my relationship with the Lord is interrupted. There's separation. And we read all about. Go on the news for 20 seconds and read.
Oh, man. That's a way to depress yourself right there.
Those people don't have shalom.
No.
Like they're worried about the state of our country. They're worried about, in some aspects I am too. They're worried about what's going to be happening within the next, is there going to be a recession? Like, is the housing market going to crash? Whatever.
And it's like, of course, we all know it's going to crash at some point. It's not a will it, it's a when will it.
Yeah, and so, like, they're walking on eggshells with their life. And I don't want to do that with my soul, because that is, that's my life. And so, I don't know. I guess the Lord does speak through me through a lot of peace, because it's what he wants from me.
Man, that is smart. That's not, you don't want to be walking on eggshells with your soul.
I hope not, yeah.
Now, and you had mentioned before that when you were looking at church as a younger person, it didn't seem like it was like worth the time. But then when you got into those high school years and you had that friend, there was that place where you said, okay, well, it wasn't worth my time before, but now in sophomore year, yeah, I'll carve out the Mondays for it. Do you think that was mainly due to a social element, or was that more so because you had a point where you wanted to actually start digging more into it?
Yeah, so I think it definitely, I think it might have totally started as a social, another social aspect within my life. Every high school student, I guess, is gonna, like, they're gonna want to belong before they believe. So if you are stewarding an environment or a facility, a time, an atmosphere, and you do it well, people are gonna want to come to it. That's not to say that attraction is everything.
Right.
Attraction doesn't mean that you're gonna have retention rates high. But attraction means that you will have a good amount of people attend, because friends are going to invite friends because they feel safe there. Friends are going to, and then those friends will invite other friends because they feel safe there. And that's really what it felt like for me. It was a small group. It wasn't like there was 10 to 20 of us, and they were all my age, and they all knew like everything that was going on in a high schooler's life, because they're all in high school. And it's being led by a high schooler, which,
was it really?
It has its pros and cons, yes. But,
relatability, but also maturity, question mark?
Yes. It was just, the Lord told him to do, hey, you need to have this Bible study for high schoolers. And he was like, okay, I don't know. And it was his first ministry. And then we did we did campus ministry at the school. We call it, we went through this organization called FCA. It's Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And, him and I were both athletes. And so we're like, how do we, I want my peers to know about this good news that we've received. So we started to co-lead in that. And, we brought pizza, because who doesn't like pizza, man? And we hosted it at lunch. So, there was no reason that you couldn't go. And I think at our peak, we saw 175 kids every week.
Holy smokes.
We had about 4,000 kids in that campus, so it's a very small amount of people, but it was what we could do as high schoolers. And we still thank the Lord, and we still talk about that. There's funny times where who let us do that, man? Who let us get in front of people and just start speaking with no hey, did you even run through your message once? Nah, I'm just gonna go up there, man. I think, like I said, you gotta belong before you believe, and that's not. I don't think that's a law, but it's definitely true in a lot of areas. For me, it's true. For a ton of my friends, it's true. For a ton of friends that I brought to youth group as a high schooler, it's true. I'm kind of recalling on the people that you bring to church, even now as an adult. If I don't feel like this place understands, I think we see this more with race and ethnicity. If you're let's just say you're a Black American attending a predominantly white church, right, you will not enjoy your time there. You will likely not enjoy your time there. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with that church. It's just that they're reaching a very specific type of people. Yeah, they're reaching a predominantly white audience. And thankfully where we're at, we see a very diverse range of people. So
it's been growing more and more,
even in age and ethnicity. So there's there's multiple aspects which we got to think about when we're thinking about like, does this community seem immersive? And if you have a large range of age and ethnicity, I think the answer is probably leaning towards yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had mentioned that the attraction element of it, and attraction versus retention. And I think it's definitely true. Like, you might have something, and maybe the numbers don't retain 100%, 90%. But first of all, the fact that you have the opportunity at that person is worth something, because a lot of times you'll have a person who might come a couple times, drop off for years, but then they pop up years later. And I mean, you're an example of that yourself.
Yeah.
Where you were in it, dropped off for a few years, and then you're like, yeah, I'll try something out.
Yeah, definitely so.
And so I think speaking to that element of sowing the seed is like that attraction. I know that there can be some controversy. How much are we doing? Too much attraction, too much modernism.
Yeah.
But if the attraction is the first step, and then it allows something solid to be planted, then it seems worth it to me.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. When you say that, I think of the line, I want a timeless ministry more than I want a trendy ministry.
Right.
I want something that will sustain. Not only like can the people leading it sustain it, but can the congregation sustain this intensity, this kind of atmosphere that we're creating. And that's not to say that like there should be no cool lights, there should be no haze, there should be like no, like those things are good. The Lord's blessed us with either finances or the abilities to manage those lights, and so I want something that is sustainable, and that is still like every week is a sweet fragrant to the Lord. So
absolutely, beautifully said. So something that Mr. Kaleb Pickle dabbles in significantly. The man is a reader like none other that I've met in recent years. And it's super interesting, your interest and the vast knowledge it seems that you have about a plethora of just all the different kinds of subjects. And like, where does that interest come from? Why do you read so much?
So I actually hated reading as a kid.
What?
I didn't like it.
This guy's just a full 180 pager. He's like, no church and then church. Don't like to read. Super into it.
It's totally weird. And I just read something the other day by Oswald Chambers in his book called Spiritual Leadership. It's early on in the book, and it's an easy read. Like, I would encourage everyone to read it, and leader or not, like anyone who God raises up will naturally become a leader. David, Moses, Aaron, we'll read the plethora of people in the Bible who became leaders. But he's like, Oswald, he was saying that, when the Holy Spirit indwells and immerses himself into us, what happens? Dormant gifts become lived out, or, experienced. And so, like, before I wasn't a reader, but now I have a huge passion for reading, because I think that's a product of having the Holy Spirit within me. Before I didn't care about my emotional maturity, but now, like, it's something I tried to be aware of, because it's I guess it's just something that was dormant within me before, but the Holy Spirit is activated. Yeah.
Go ahead. You were saying something?
I was going to answer your question finally. Why do I like reading? I'm a learner. I've always been a learner, but the way in which I learned has changed a little bit. So I used to be a very hands-on, and I think that has a lot to do with sports. Like
Makes sense, yeah.
So definitely. Like I played, you probably can tell, like I played football.
My man was running.
I don't look like a football player at all.
Wide receiver?
I was a tight end. Or later when I stopped growing out and kept just growing up, I was a wide receiver, yeah. And I also played baseball for about 12 years. So I really enjoyed baseball. That was my primary sport. And then I played volleyball in middle and high school. But I think I learned a lot about like through learning, because my hands were learning and my body was learning and experiencing new things when I was doing sports. And so like naturally I would like that in my classroom as well. But I guess reading really started within me when COVID happened, because I wasn't able to be around and kind of use my hands as I wished. And so like what did I turn to? I turned to a new form of learning. And I had to, because we were online school, and it was
oh yeah, that was pretty sink or swim, baby.
it was a little brutal at times, yes, but I'm naturally an introvert, so I was kind of okay with it.
Introverts thrive during pandemics.
we sort of did, man. I think they definitely took the opportunity as take on business models and whatnot and stuff.
Absolutely.
And so I think I was kind of forced to learn in a new way of learning. So like I think that's where my passion kind of derives from.
That's so interesting that it was. I mean, they're just these. It's so cool that there's just these like highlights of moments that you kind of have had, and then it's just like, oh, bam, this unlocked this, and it's like a character on a build your own character thing. It's like, reach this check mark and da da da.
It really is.
That's super cool. So when you mentioned emotional maturity and how you had that friend that would kind of give you those whisperings of how you need to work better, and then over time you started to develop in ways that allowed that, and it happened naturally. But when you think of emotional maturity, what does that mean to you as, I guess, one, as a follower, two, as a man, and three, just as a human?
Yeah, so time and place is definitely like where I'd lead with that. And then I would also, as a follower, I would say Thessalonians. There's a time to rejoice. There's a time to be bitter. There's a time to be angry. There's a time for everything. Time to live, time to die. I think in a maturity, an emotional maturity, because I think we have spiritual and emotional maturity, and this is from Pete Scarsgaro's books, Emotionally Healthy, and then fill in the blank: discipleship, church, spirituality.
You said that was Pete who?
Scarsgaro. He's a pastor up in New York, or formerly pastor in New York, and he has this working theory through a lot of his books, and it's you cannot be spiritually mature unless you're emotionally mature. And I think what he gets at in a lot of different ways is you have to understand that the way that which you handle conflict situations, the way that you talk and encourage and exhort people, the way that you outlive or kind of live out your spiritual gifts, a lot of that has to do with like your psychology and your understanding of your emotional awareness. Like, I would never make a decision if I'm hungry or if I'm tired or if I'm just angry. Why? Because that doesn't seem like it's a mature or it seems like it's an impulse.
That's so accurate. Like, how many times are people like having important conversations with other people and arguments start where they don't need to, literally just because one person is slightly irritable, hungry. It has nothing to do with the person, but it's just they're in a more volatile state, and so their reactions to that person are more easily triggered.
Yeah, I mean, likely that's probably the root of most conflicts. And I know spouses feel that a lot more than maybe I do, because they're with someone constantly. So yeah, I think there's a time for everything. That's what Scripture says. And then, as a person, as a human, why? This is maybe more so my convictions, but why would I ever want to like misbehave in the presence of like someone else? Like, I just feel like it's wasting their time. And a lot of like, if I were to be here right now and just kind of like make jokes the whole time, how would that be? It would be slightly entertaining, yes, for me to be looking like a fool, but how would that be a good use of your time for people who want to understand things and learn and kind of pursue a career or whatever it be while they're listening. Even for you and I, like, I don't want to waste your time. Like, we're here and we're renting out a space, and like we're not gonna, like, I want to honor that. And so I think that's a little bit of emotional maturity. There's a depth to it, obviously, but I think that's the surface of it.
Yeah, and that ability to recognize these different instances of, and a lot of that comes to a person's awareness of things, because I think, would you agree that it's probably accurate that a lot of immaturity that people may display in various situations just comes from some type of lack of self-awareness in a lot of ways, or lack of awareness of the conditions around?
Yeah, and obviously we know that boys mature a little bit slower than females. So like it'll take a little bit longer for males to kind of catch up in that area because we lack a little bit. And that's just kind of the human body. And I think that comes with a lot of time, a lot of social understanding, and kind of like, someone who's a little bit maybe socially awkward or socially like very excited. I'm thinking like of a max extrovert.
Right.
They probably don't understand fully the extent of time and place. They are probably more of like, hey, this is a time for fun. Like, oh, okay, let me make it all about fun. And then like, I'll leave no room for anything else except fun. And I think that could be harmful in certain areas, certain settings, maybe. There's certainly times that there's like, this is fun. Like volleyball games, when we play as a young adult community, volleyball games, that's a time for fun. There can totally be a spiritual aspect to it, but it first and foremost, it's community and it's fun. And people who don't understand that, like I'm thinking of like, what if I rolled in on young adults playing volleyball, and I'm just like, guys, we just need to pray. We need to get on our faces and pray right now. And then there's music playing that's like not necessarily like worship music. Like it's just kind of like, it's for the vibes, really. And
people would look at you and they'd be like, dude,
no.
What do you, and you just want to unilaterally decide this?
Yeah. Or like, hey, I'm listening to lo-fi music in my headphones, and someone barges in the room, they're like, let's go, and they like start to yell, and like they get all like super crazy, and you're just like, this does not match what's going on in my head right now.
Like, bro, you are not meeting me where I'm at. You're trying to pull me all the way to you.
I'm so confused. Is there like a robbery going on or something? Yeah, so
do you, there were two things that you had mentioned as far as we talk about time for everything and also boys maturing. There is certainly that out of the idea that boys mature slower, and a portion of that has to come from the difference of how boys and girls are raised up in a certain way, right? To where boys, like you had mentioned, a lot of your years were spent strictly in sports and doing those things. And for girls, it's a lot more the social aspect. And we can see that super clearly, I think, amongst some of the middle schoolers when, for those of you that don't know, I serve with the student ministry as well at our church Journey. And the girls super glom onto each other. The guys hang out, but it's kind of hang out and like poke.
Hey, you want to go shoot basketball?
Yeah.
And not talk?
Yeah, literally, unless it's talking smack.
Yeah.
And there's differences. Those differences exist because they were already set there previously. And so I guess I say all this to say, what is a way, or how do you see socialization as a young boy that is in 2023 versus how you understood it maybe when you were 8 years old at the time?
Yeah.
And how have things changed in your opinion?
So as someone who kind of watches development happen as an elementary person, I see that they have a rare case. They have like 2 years of total loss of like understanding social constructs and cues. Like I saw the other day, and this is like a little bit of a tangent, but I was watching a middle schooler engage with another middle schooler, and there were 2 boys, and I'm like, they're eating, either like plotting to tear down a vending machine, or they're like talking about like what they're gonna have for dinner. There's no in between. And one of them was like, had like a visibly just a downcast demeanor to him, and the other one was clapping. And I was like, oh, these dudes might have just played basketball or something, I don't know, and one of them just lost. And but you know, I approached the kid afterwards and was like, hey, is everything okay? And he kind of shared some family things that were going on. And one of them was, the other guy was clapping, and like and he said, my friend just doesn't understand. And I was like, yeah, well, he definitely doesn't, because he was clapping and screaming. And it was like no ill intent from the kid who was, you know, exotic. But it, you know, it could cause more pain, or, you know, it could be like, you know, a tension in their friendship now. And I see a lot of like things like that happen within our environment, as like, you know, we're around you know, younger people, and you know, you serve in our 5th graders, and so watching their kind of developmental stage, it feels like something's missing sometimes, whether that's a neuro link that's just like linking like, oh, I learned this way, let me start learning this way, and asking questions. Like I'm a questionnaire. Like that's how I like to learn, and sometimes kids just lack that. So sometimes you have to bring it out of them. I know for me, not that I had the you know, the stress-free life or anything, but I know I grew up in a house with 4 other family members, siblings, and then, you know, 2 parents. So there's 6 people, or 7 people in our house.
Man, you had a big. I didn't realize you had so many siblings, man.
Yeah, and you know, as our family grew older, also, we had, you know, some step siblings and stuff as well. So I have about 12 siblings. About 12, yeah, I do have.
Holy.
So, you know, I learned a lot of different things from a lot of different people.
For sure.
Even being
what was your position on all of them?
I was second. So second oldest. But now I'm the 3rd oldest.
Okay.
I'm still pretty high up there. So I take a lot of pride
in the top 3, bro.
I take a lot of pride in it. But I don't, you know, I think it's not to say that, you know, parents are doing like an ill job or a poor job at their job at parenting, because it's a hard job. Might I even say a full-time job to parent someone?
For sure, for sure.
So, you know, I think parents are doing the best they can, and, you know, people who have resources for parenting should provide resources to parents. But you know, we had a different thing going on when we were growing up. We had a lot of exposure to different things, and you know, either if you went to public or private school. I went to public school my whole life, and it wasn't until college to where I went to my first private school. And so there's just like, and there's a massive amount of exposure, and the kids are starting to see it a little bit more, I think, but they're not, and not in a humble way, they're not where I was as a middle schooler with that amount of exposure. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think when I think about, as you were saying it, I couldn't help but think like the difference of content that they're exposed to. I know when I was a kid, I think about things like Blue's Clues, Dora the Explorer, Barney, versus now a lot of kids are, if they even watch anything, it's mainly like a SpongeBob or Teen Titans Go. I know that was big for a while, but I don't even know if there's any TV. Now it's all literally YouTubers and memes, and a lot of kids are getting onto the VR space online, and they'll just go online beyond that for days and days. And so even at that level, like I have clear memories of, you know, when I was a kid, we didn't have online matching and get on and just talk on your headset. If you wanted to play with your friends, you had to go over to their house, talk to them, see them. Oh, you're walking into their room. Oh, you made a mess somewhere. Their mom's going to come in and say, hey, you're going to come over here. You better keep my house clean.
Yeah.
Versus now a kid can be on their couch with all of their junk food around them and, just be hanging out in their little fort. And so I think about that on like a macro level. And what it seems to me like is it creates just an opportunity for there to be ever more desocialization of especially boys, as opposed to increasing how much socialization they are getting in person. They get more exposure to each other talking wise, but the nature of it is now trying to replicate who they see on YouTube, that personality that's just talking at them from a computer screen in maybe some sarcastic tones and whatnot.
Yeah.
And when you give that story of the one boy who's just clapping and the other boy who's going through something, I can't help but think that that is emblematic of someone shares something real, and then the other boy, because all that they get exposed to is dopamine firing content, they don't know how to respond to something shared with them that is the opposite of that is meant to be more serious, that needs empathy and compassion. And a lot of, because of the state of the economy, it's so much more difficult for a parent to be able to take that time now to pull them away from their device that is teaching them how to be socially and giving them this dopamine, and to have conversations with them about, hey, what's something that happened? How were you able to look out for your fellow student? What compassion were you able to show? And also, here's how you talk to somebody when they share something vulnerable with you.
Yeah. I definitely agree with everything you said. I think we're in a spot right now where like technology is competing for a lot of like relational equity, I guess, within it's us and it's a laptop or an iPad. And which is hard because I know that kids are, they desire a relationship, because who doesn't? Like, that's what we're made for. Yeah. But they have found that this is more fulfilling. An iPad on a 5-minute YouTube video or a 30-second short is more fulfilling than worth trying to learn social construct and then have a conversation with someone. And for that reason, I think there's a lot of correction that needs to happen. And mostly the consumerism world. Like, I would never give my kid an iPad. That seems just really dangerous right now. And that's not to say that anyone that has an iPad is, doing wrong parenting. But I'm under the impression that if I give my kid an iPad with no limits or screen limits or anything, then they will turn out to be someone who is lacking in a lot of social areas. And there's tons of evidence that, that supports a lot of the developmental things with, even like technology being around them, them not even necessarily using it, but it being around them. Think about how many times you have a conversation with a parent and their kid is like latching onto the leg and they're like, "Can I play on your phone?" Like, yeah, you don't need it, man. Like, can you just work me down in 5 minutes?
Well, as somebody that I was around a lot of adults as they conversed, like if I was there and if I was bored, I might have read a book instead, or I might have, looked around at the things around me, or maybe I was just got bored of doing all that, and so I actually just paid attention to what was being said, definitely. And I learned from it. Yeah.
And that's how I was as a kid. I always wanted to be at the adult table when, my parents would have friends over. They would sit outside at a fire or whatever, and I always wanted to be part of that conversation. It was just something that, like, I did not need my electronics or anything nor was I really used to it at that moment because I was still kind of growing up as it was growing up. And so I wanted to be a part of these things. Not necessarily that I want to learn, but I just wanted to be a presence there.
Right.
I wanted to be acknowledged, I guess, if you will.
That's such a big difference because, like, before, there was always a thing of, like, the idea of a kid's table and the adult table. That was super common. That was super common language back in early 2000s,
Yes.
or, like, late 90s. Oh, yeah, go sit with the other kids over there. You even have a smaller table and everything. And then you're just, like, at a certain point, you turn, like, 10, 11, you're like, man, I'm so much taller than everybody. And these people still talk like babies. I want to talk like a grown-up. Versus now, I don't even know if there is an idea of an adult table and a kid's table anymore.
Yeah.
Now it's just, everybody tries to sit at the table and then, oh, you're bored, or oh, you're getting grouchy, or oh, you're complaining. Okay, go, sometimes it's go play with your toys, which in that case, I'm still okay with that. But a lot of times it's go play with your toys, and then instead of going to play with the toy, it's actually just getting onto YouTube again and watching a video there.
Right.
And so that difference, and this is kind of where the idea of spiritual formation comes in. Because would you agree with the concept that regardless of your intentionality with it, your spirit is always being formed? So the premise of when a person goes, when they're consuming something, taking in something, when they're engaging, they're going to be forming it either intentionally or passively, and the difference is going to be what do they have in mind as they're doing it. And so what do you find to be an important tool for somebody that wants to, if they see themselves, let's say, for example, the middle schooler boy who completely lacked that moment, and he finds himself now as a high schooler or coming to be a young adult male, and he's still wondering, I just can't seem to keep people to want to be around me. And now they're wondering, like, what is going on? Or even, the person that is just a hard-working person, and then they get off work and they can't quite figure out why they can't get who they would consider their friends to want to be around them. What are some steps that you think that a person can take to intentionally form themselves as a person?
Yeah, so when I first hear that question, I automatically think of, so we're tripartite beings. Just as like the Trinity is Father, Son, Holy Spirit. We are minds, body, and spirit. Inseparable. Those need to be held as this is the unity as the human being form.
So quick question in there also, because I know some people wonder about this. When you say mind, body, and soul, how does a person think about each of those separately? Like, what's the difference between a soul and a mind?
Yeah, so your mind is like your logic. So you asked me to come on this podcast, and I could have done it without praying about it. And I could have just been like, yeah, this is like, it'll be fun. It will stretch my brain. It'll get me moving for the day. It'll be creative outlet for me. And then the soul is like, man, how does my Creator get the glory? How does my soul settle with having a conversation with another person who has the spirit of the living God with him? And how do I extract the holy wisdom and the holy ambition from this person? And so,
man, that's powerful.
And I don't know. Maybe it's fancy language, but I'm under the impression, as what I read in Scripture and what I read from different authors, that my motivation for studying all of this is because I'm inseparable of mind, body, and spirit. So when I'm saying being formed, it is I'm forming all of those in their own entity, but knowing that they have correlation with the other entities.
So, as you gave your definition of soul, I think that level of explanation is completely different than anybody I think that I've never heard someone explain it in a way that made it sound like it was such a deep part of them. So saying that, I mean to say that people think mind, body, soul, they think like with all of their essence, essentially. And I think that's almost exactly how I hear it boiled down is, oh, all of your essence. Okay, well, what does that even mean? But when you say, how does this fulfill the purpose of my Lord? How does this work so that I can extract the best out of myself, their self? How can we kind of magnify use this as a moment to magnify the purpose of each of us? And I think that switch in the lens of it, I don't think, and you can correct me if you disagree, but I would feel pretty confident to say I don't think a lot of people think of the soul in that way, because even me, I didn't think of it in that way until you just said it right now. But now when I do think about it and I hear that, I'm like, holy smokes, what's my time marker? This is at 50-ish minutes, 49 minutes. This is going to be like a playback moment of what is the soul?
Yeah, well, can you answer that? What do you think?
I mean, I subscribe to your definition now.
I don't think that's the full extent of what the soul is. I think if you want a better, more formulated definition of the soul, I think you ought to read Soul Keeping by John Ortberg. He kind of pokes at the question at like, what is a soul? How do I satisfy my soul? What does my soul need? How does it interact with the world? It's a super short read. I mean, you could probably sit down and in 2 weeks, and a weekend, you'll be done. And you won't be an expert on the soul, but you'll totally be in the right direction.
Yeah. Quick question. My fiance has been recently having us on this thing called Blinkist, and it allows you to consume basically spark notes of a book.
Okay.
And you get everything read to you and divided in sections, like maybe 8 sections. Like I consume John Comer's Living in Lies, or
Live No Lies.
Live No Lie. Oh, opposite. And it had something in 23 minutes, and I consumed that recently. Do you think you can get the full value of something like Soul Keeping from kind of a quick notes, or do you think every single page is necessary?
It depends, I would say. Do I want this information to be digestible and quick? Or do I want this to be something that is like turning in my stomach for a while? And I have to put the book down and really think about either the philosophical aspect or the spiritual aspect of the question being answered. Like, for instance, I would never read a Dallas Willard book in one sitting. He's just a really deep thinker. He would never be someone that I can just sit down and read 23 minutes of a review on a book that's 300 pages long and just be like, I'm content with that.
Yeah.
But there is also like, I would totally be content on reading a 23 page excerpt, whatever, of like a memoir of Abraham Lincoln's life, or an event that happened in history, you know? I would be content with that maybe more than I would be like on a philosophical or spiritual level.
So maybe if you just want to be able to get like, to see if you have an interest in going deeper, do that. But if it's something you really want to get the full impact of, go the full content of it.
Yeah. And I think it honors a lot of like what the writer's trying to get at too. Because they wrote that book as a experience. So when someone writes a book, they write it as like, it could be a story sometimes, or I think it could be an experience of learning. There's a book I just put down because I just finished it, and it was called Searching for Enough by Tyler Staton. And it was one of the books I read at night before I had fallen asleep. And he was going through like, here's where you're at. In the beginning of the book, he's like, here's where you're at, and here's where you want to be. And that's like his prologue. And so he takes us through this journey in this book, and it's like, here's human condition. Here's where it's gone wrong. Here's how it's still going wrong. Here's how God here's how God restores it in the Old Testament. Here's how Jesus restores it in the New Testament. How it restores life and relationship with him. And here's how the Holy Spirit is continuing this work today. And here's the offer that the Spirit of the living God has given you. Now, do you want it or not? And that's how he ends the book. So I think it's really, really cool. And that was an experience of like every chapter was learning and progressing in the story.
Yeah. And there's something definitely to be said about like how it can stimulate like kind of that creative bone to mentally picture it all in your mind versus having someone speak it to you. So there's definitely something to be said there as well.
Yeah.
So the next question, I guess, would be, once a person does define this idea of the mind, soul, and body, and they maybe take something as, let's say they agree with your idea, but if they don't agree with God, how do they use that piece there then?
Yeah. So I would say to the person who maybe doesn't believe in the Christian God, you believe in something else, right?
Right.
Yourself, maybe, if you're a proclaimed atheist. Something you're looking for hope. I think that's the quest of human, is what is the ultimate state of me, is really what it is. What is my most evolved form, and how do I get there? And for believers of Christ, it is through him, through our faith, that we experience true life, true hope, and then from believing it and living it out and appreciating it, we're offered what does Galatians say? Fruits of the Spirit. And we can rattle those off, but when you're disconnected from that, you have no fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the fruit, and I think that so there is this concept of something similar that exists in a space called the red pill space. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Is this a Matrix thing?
Yeah. And the tenet of it goes to be that the reason why a lot of guys will end up struggling in all different places, whether it's career-wise or whether it's their relationship status, whatever it might be, is because they are off of their purpose. And a lot of content stresses, be on your purpose, focus on what you're good at, focus at what you have a proclivity towards. And I look at that, and I look at the idea of how we're supposed to, as followers, we're supposed to do our best to figure out what is God's plan for us. And the ideas of these two things are almost parallel in a lot of ways, with kind of the place where they branch out being that for us as Christians, we can look at all of these different books conglomerated in the Bible, and we can look at these characters that had all these different approaches and all of these different scenarios and say, I really empathize with Joseph right now. I feel like I'm in my prison and I'm just waiting for my glow up from Potiphar noticing me. Or I empathize with Abram going out on a limb, and I don't know exactly where it's taking me, but I know
a lot of trust.
Exactly. Versus with people that, like you said, would kind of look for their highest evolved self. They may look at people like Mark Cuban or Jeff Bezos, or all of these other people, and then they might subscribe to like hustle culture in order to get that done. So what do you see as being merits of subscription to either side of those approaches?
I think that's a lot of information for that we can dive into, but to say that we are the way that in which we go about fulfilling ourselves is what I kind of hear when you say that. Like, I don't think it's bad that you would like to be a millionaire one day if you choose that. But I would say where's that motivation deriving from? Is it my pride? Like, do I want like a nice car? Like, what advantages does that have in my life? Where does money like lead me to? Personally, I think it leads to problems. A lot of times it probably leads to problems. You have more money to manage.
More money, more problems, how the saying goes.
I mean, like, think about the amount of millionaires who fail every day because they made their first million and then they failed to manage it. Because everyone, IRS people, are when they hear that, they're going to want to come for your throat.
Oh, yeah. And tax brackets get real high.
Yeah. I mean, you're now in a different area. Like, you're with different people, and you just don't know how to be with that people yet. And so I think a lot of people, they have the right heart. They want to do good things, but the good things are bad things. I want to be a millionaire, and I want to have 100,000 followers on Instagram, but I'm not going to better anyone's life with that. Like, it's just it's literally just festering up things that really don't matter. Like, I'm not gonna be able. I know you've heard this, and everyone's heard this 1,000 times. I'm not gonna be able to take it to the grave. So, like, why would I? Like, am I gonna be buried with my money?
Right.
I sure hope not. I sure hope it's given to an organization or to my family. I'm under the impression that you can search for money and you can find it and still never be fulfilled. I've heard way too many stories of people who've won the lottery, who've committed suicide, people who have.
You know, that stat goes that 70% of lottery winners, that's of the winners, those people end up broker than when they started.
Yeah.
So already your chances are microbically low, but then even if you do win, you are 70% likely to end up dead broke in 0 to 5 years.
Yeah, and that could be either investment issues or whatever, but I don't know. That's why I encourage people not to play the lottery. One, because it's gambling, and like, you're just gonna throw away money that could be given or invested into a mutual fund or whatever, Roth IRA, whatever you want. I don't care what you do with it, but and I think it's not only on the financial level. Like, there's other tenets of our hearts that, what do we want? We want a celebrity status, but guess what? Selena Gomez has even talked about it. Billie Eilish has talked about it. Highly depressed individuals who wish at some moments that their lives were never populated with this kind of fame. Because guess what? It is just a cold place to be when everyone wants what you offer but not who you are. And it's sort of changing a little bit because I know, like, Selena Gomez had just recently made a documentary, which I haven't watched yet, but I've heard, I've read some
now that you bring it up, I'll have to.
And Billie Eilish has had tons of interviews where she's like, I'm just depressed. So, like, I think you're able to extract out of anything that's not from the Lord. What is it going to leave? It's going to leave emptiness. But I know one thing fulfills it, and I know you know this too, because you've experienced it. That there's the only thing that is not even so politics is huge one. I'll get back to what I was just saying. Politics is huge. Like, I think about, like, when I was in high school, I loved politics.
Same.
And I loved being non-biased.
Could you spend hours debating people, just playing devil's advocate?
I probably could, but it's probably not something that's good for me.
Right.
I know it'll fuel something within me that I don't want fueled in me.
The worst parts of ourselves, right?
Yes, definitely. And it's the worst part of me, definitely, because I know I'm passionate about certain things that I'm passionate about, but I don't know where they line up with the Lord yet. So, like, I'm asking the Lord every time I read the news, should I read this, Lord? And I use an app called All Sides, so it gets, like, both sides of the news. Like, you can get very conservative and very liberal aspects on the same article.
Wow.
Which I enjoy, but, like, every time I open it up, it's like, Lord, do you want me to read about this Miami shooting that just took place?
Just saw that,
do my eyes need to see this? Because this is demonic. What is going on is demonic. Like, this place here on earth is harmful to the soul.
Mm-hmm.
So like, Lord, do you want me to consume this? And he says, go about with caution a lot of the time. When it seems like it's hard on your soul, turn it off. And so what I'm saying is like that even leaves you empty. You know, like you can endlessly debate politics, and then you can change ideologies. You can make everyone conform to socialism or communism, whatever you choose, but it will not satisfy the soul. One thing does, and that is the resurrection of Christ. And you know that's true, and I know that's true. And no one can argue against our stories or the other billion amount of people who've argued that Christ has changed their life. You can't argue that. It's like, go and have the conversation with all those billions of people. And you know what? You weren't there, so you don't know. Your evidence is little, and their evidence is very high. So that's my take on, like, I guess your question. Long-winded, but it's my take.
No, the explanation is always great. I don't know what your time looks like. When do you think you have to be wrapping up?
I got time, man. Don't worry
Okay. No, I think that goes and really hits at the heart of it, because when I think about the people that are going and they're just subscribed to hustle culture and all of these self-made millionaires and, you know, trying to live out the American dream.
Yeah.
None of that. I don't have a problem with like people wanting to work hard. That is, you know, that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I think so.
Especially as a man in what our place is to be. You know, we're called to suffer, literally. In Genesis, you know, we're called to suffer from the get-go.
Yeah, it's like a product of our sin. Like, it's just, and in Philippians is like, there's joy in our suffering. So
Absolutely. And like, I think some of what I'm realizing now, and I think we've heard it so much from the people that are older than us. We always hear people say, oh, give up your 20s, suffer your 20s, and then when you're 30 years old, 40 years old, you can kick back and relax.
Yeah.
And
sounds nice.
Right? And like, I think that some of us have taken that and we've taken it to like super little extremes. Like, my fiance will tell anybody like, oh my goodness, Devahntau's been working on this podcast 15 hours a day.
Yeah, yes.
And on Saturdays he's doing interviews. That's supposed to be time we're hanging out together. Like, I got a problem with this now.
Yeah.
And those types of efforts are things that we're meant to do for a time, but not for a lifetime. And so at a certain point, everybody, whether it's man, woman, or whatever else, everybody wants a point where they can kind of set back and look at the fruits of their labor. And I think that's where we start to see like, okay, well, at the end of it all, what you're on the mission for is for personal achievement, happiness, fulfillment.
Human accolades, yeah.
Absolutely. But when you go and reverse engineer that, it's all built on what? And if you build it off of you're doing all this work so that you can have fun with your boys, but you know at the end of your road you want a relationship, have you been building yourself in a way that leads you to be prepared for that at a certain point? Or if you're looking for just being able to look at your track record and say, this is what I've done.
Yeah.
Like, are you going to be happy with your track record, or are you going to look at that and say, man, burned a lot of bridges there, hurt a lot of people, can't go back to that city.
Yeah.
And I think when I look at it and I think about the two different paths, for me, you can be a Christ follower that seeks after millions and does it in the name of the Lord. But if you're someone that's like an atheist, you can't be an atheist, seek after your millions, and still have the Lord. Mm-hmm. So to me, as a previous electrician, we love to have tools. I love to have 12 different kinds of screwdrivers.
Wire cutters, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Everything. Hammers, mallets. What's the difference between a hammer and a mallet? They both pound things. Oh, one does it softer, one makes a dent. But I would still always have a hammer and a mallet separate. Mm-hmm. Why? Because sometimes you want to dig into your tool pouch and be able to get exactly what you need for an exact moment. And so when I consider atheism logically to me, when I think at it from a trade standpoint, you limit yourself from a tool that you can use, and that tool, probably the best tool you could have, is the Holy Spirit. And the guidance that you can get, the wisdom you can get from the Bible, a community of guys that you can be around, a community of elders you can be around, the maturation that you go through from leading those younger than you. Yeah. You rob yourself of a lot of that stuff when you subscribe to hustle culture from an atheistic standpoint. And then when you look back, you're looking and you're like, I've got all these millions, but what else do I have besides these millions?
Yeah. Man, that's a lot of good stuff. And my addition to that is probably, let's how did I acquire this money? As if I'm a believer, that I think God called me to be a real estate agent and be a really good real estate agent. Mm-hmm. And I make $5 million a year, let's say, which I would never do real estate just because I can't do that world. I don't even like numbers. So like reading Barnes stuff is just hard sometimes. How did I get this $1 million or $5 million a year? Was it stolen? Mm-hmm. Even like a tax collector would have done back in, the time of Jesus. Like, Romans, Israel was under Roman occupation. And so that meant that they would pay Roman taxes. And they would hire out people among the Israelites. Yeah. And they would have them, collect taxes for the Roman government, because why would they do it, Mm-hmm. And they were like, you can even ask for more money and just say, and just keep the difference that you ask for and what the Romans require. And so that's why they were super hated, is because tax collectors were people who betrayed their own blood and their own race and nation, mm-hmm. Which in that time was a very, very consequential thing. And you were beyond hated. I don't think I'm sure Hebrew, Greek, or Aramaic have like a better word for hated than our simple English language, but and so like they acquired their money off of stealing. I would call it stealing. Yeah. And so how do I come about getting this $5 million a year? Was I obeying the Lord and then Him blessing me through that? Was I obeying the Lord, and then in my 20s, I finally reap $100,000 when I turned 29, mm-hmm. and I was just learning and being obedient to what the Lord had me to do. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a problem with hustle culture in itself on a philosophical level, is that you are so scared of death, and you try so hard to squeeze eternity into 70 years that you miss out on the joy of life. So in my 20s, I don't want to be the guy that hustles so that he can have a good career and good publicity. I want to be someone who's faithful to the Lord and what He's called me to do. And right now, that's right where I am. That is me being a college student. It's me working as an elementary coordinator, and it's me trying to do personal missions, like reaching people in coffee shops, and the convictions that I have from the Lord. But on the other side of when I'm not trying to squeeze eternity, this is my only life on earth, when I'm not doing that, I have a holy anticipation towards death. And this is from Rich Velotis, and he's a pastor.
Yeah, he's spitting right now, man.
He's a pastor in New York.
You said you have a holy anticipation of death.
Yeah, I mean, I try at least. It's not always, but what is death for the believer? It is
The
not.
end.
It's not the final chapter.
For the believer.
For the believer,
Sorry.
Death for the unbeliever is certainly the end of your road.
Yeah.
That's what you think, right?
Mm-hmm.
But death for the believer is something with so much more than that.
Right.
It is pure bliss. It is true shalom. It's peace with God. It is eternity of you just being with Him. You know, the one who created you. You get to meet Him face to face, and you get to dwell with Him. And for me, that gets me ambitious towards death. And I say holy because like it is. That is from the Lord. I don't fear that. I don't fear the aspect of death within, life here, because I know what's after. Because I saw that, and I saw that in the Gospels when Jesus defeated the grave. So, there's a huge issue that needs correction, and that's that if you work hard enough, you'll live long enough. But I think that is just false. I think be with God and do as Christ did, and that leads to true life.
Man, this one, the idea of, tell me if you got this from a book, man, because this one would hit different. Unbelievers stuff eternity into 70 years.
Yeah, average lifespan.
Yeah. Dang.
Yeah, which, we're trying to expand that 70 years now because we're afraid of death. So I'm going to put anti-aging cream on my face so I don't look older, so I can have a better life in my 40s. Or I'm going to...
Instead of enjoying it and taking like some type of gratification that I've had 40 strong years where I toiled here and then I grew here and I sat back and looking at it all with joy.
And I have wrinkles and gray hair now.
Yeah.
And I don't like how I look. And even Elon Musk is doing a lot of this. Like, if you read some of the things he's doing in his private sector with his own personal money, he's trying to revive people, essentially. So he's like, I know a lot of people have heard about Neuralink and a bunch of other of his projects. Like, they are trying so hard to do something only the Lord can do, and that's sustain life. So, and we're falling into a big issue because he's wasting so much money and so much time and so much mental capacity doing these things that he can literally not do. Like, you can have a heart transplant, yes, but you cannot sustain that life. Like, it will still fail. That heart will still eventually stop beating.
Yeah. With neural, is it a thing of trying to electropulse like the heart to stay alive, or is it
not necessarily
continued consciousness?
It's more of like I know it could be used in some therapeutic things like rewiring neural pathways. I know it could be
to like take away someone's tremor that they might be having.
It could be. There's a lot of different directions I think he can go with it. I think probably more leans towards like almost us becoming AI is kind of how I'm perceiving it. So we can like develop a creative idea, and then through this process of a chip in our brain, we can develop it more in depth.
So even like the concept of that, it's something to where on its face it sounds super interesting. Like I hear about it and I'm like, oh man, if I could like get something and it could allow my legs to not get tired so that way I could, run 5 miles every day, it would help me to lose these 30 pounds that I've put on recently. But then like, also there's a part of me that thinks about it and it's like, man, if I do it all through this Neuralink, it's like I attribute it all to the technology. Like I didn't accomplish that.
Yeah. But
for people that have certain symptoms, like I know I saw something, it was like an older gentleman and he had a surgery done because he was having tremors, uncontrollable tremors in his legs, and it was like debilitating him from walking, and he had a surgery and they made a cut, and in this cut made it so that that tremor no longer would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And just slowly, more and more and more over time, as those nerves were deaded, those tremors less and less over time would do it. So this Neuralink I could see as a way to kind of
it could certainly
speed that up
that way as well. Yeah.
You know, I guess looking at it, possibly I see it as a thing. It could make the quality of life better for an older person, but people our age, I think we would just use it to be on YouTube and Google all the time.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So when you consider a person who may be your age, right? And you look at the way that they select what they want to strive for. Yeah. Like right now, what's your selection that you strive for?
What do you mean by selection?
As in, when you wake up, what is your aim to accomplish every day?
I think, I mean, every day when my feet hit the ground, preferably, I'd like to, His will be done, the Lord's will be done in my life as it is on heaven. That's my goal, it's my aim, it's my selection. Mm-hmm. Does it always happen? Probably not. And so, like, I start my morning at 5:30, and I actually go and I immediately kind of, like, start to stretch. And a lot of times I'll do a short run just because that's one way to take care of my body. You do this every day? I try to do it most of the days of the week. It doesn't happen probably 2 or 3 days of the week. But I still wake up at 5:30 regardless. And why 5:30 now? It's not too early. It's not too late, and I don't mind waking up early. Yeah. I could probably function off 6 hours of sleep and be pretty good. Get you a good bed and a good pillow, and then you'll have some great quality sleep. And then put on some I don't know, maybe some essential oils. Really? I don't know. Those are some things that I do to try to get good quality sleep. Because I don't think a lot of people are under the impression if you get 8 hours of sleep, you're good. Mm-hmm. But if those 8 hours of sleep are disconnected and your quality of sleep is poor, then you're going to have a terrible day. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. I try to get good sleep instead of a lot of sleep. And what roles do the essential oils play in there? I think so. There's a lot of research that kind of is evident to like certain smells produce a certain chemical in your brain. So like think of oranges. Man, oranges smell great, and they get me excited because it's a very sweet aroma, and that triggers a chemical in my brain, and it gives me a lot of energy. I guess it's not caffeine, but it gives me energy. And when you smell something like lavender or eucalyptus, it's like that's a little bit more calming aroma. Like a lot of therapeutic sites. So like, let's say we're going to a therapy session. People turn on oil diffusers, and like they're just trying to help your nerves calm down. And this is a question that I think about a lot. How do you think things as far as different treatments, medication, therapy, spirituality, how do those things intersect in your mind? Yeah. So I think therapy, or maybe let's call it counseling either. I think those could be a little bit interchangeable. They're different in a lot of ways, but they're interchangeable. It's on the rise, which I think says something about the state of our mental conditions. I'm in a class right now that is Christian counseling, so that's my degree. And taking classes like that, you're introduced to a lot of the psychology of it. And how do I go about counseling someone? And so I'm finding that since counseling's on the rise, religious counseling is on the higher rise. It is astronomical. And to say that is not me just wishfully thinking that like someone would eventually end up at a Christian counseling, but because sometimes they could do harm. But, counseling and therapy are on the rise, and for good reasons, because the mental state of our conditions are pretty poor. And there's a lot of evidence to support all of these things because people want help. So how I think of them are simply they're tools and outlets for people to think about things. Like I'm thinking of like neurologically, we have neural pathways, in the way that information is processed is through these pathways. And so when I am thinking about someone who has struggled with something really hard, let's say that they are literally just stuck in watching erotic images on their phone at night. And it's the same place, the same time, in the same setting. Like I'm feeling tired, hungry, I'm in bed, and the lights are off.
Yeah.
My body thinks, it's supposed to think I'm supposed to be going to sleep, right? When I'm in bed and I'm tired and the lights are off. But now I've trained my neural pathways to think that it is time to look at these images. Which I think a lot of times counselors and sometimes a lot of times psychiatrists can do this as well, but they're more of like the medical professionals. They can help you right size that and alleviate the tension and kind of guide you out of that. And sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes people need more. And so they'll look at religious counseling.
Yeah, and it's a real problem. Like, I don't even know if I can say it on YouTube or on Spotify.
You just use different language.
Yeah. So corn is definitely like the effects that it has just on testosterone, on ambition, on, just across the board, all these different metrics. And every person that has risen from the depths of like depravity of some form, as far as males go, they will in some form say, oh yeah, I had to put down my computer, my phone, the magazine. I had to put that thing away for a while. And it was only when I stopped doing that and I started focusing on something else, using my attention and my time somewhere else, that I was able to make any type of significant change. And I do have some stats. So, and I think this would be something interesting to touch on here. Over 6 million men suffer from depression per year, but male depression often goes undiagnosed. So we have 6 million as identified, and that's with it going underdiagnosed. And so when we look at things, something that's become like more prevalent than ever is the adult industry and the acceptance of that. And, I don't want to turn this into a conversation where it's just yeeting all over that, because people are going to have their feelings about it one way or the other. But something that's undeniable is, as a man in 2023, with the economy the way it is, with dating culture how it is, for you to spend any amount of time indulging in adult entertainment, you're just setting yourself back in 5 different ways easily. You're setting yourself back economically, because the guy that's not doing that. So you wake up at 5:30, for example. When you wake up at 5:30, you stretch, you put on essential oils, and you go for a run. Already,
I don't do essential oils in the morning. I do that at night.
Okay.
I just kind of like, it either is in like one of the diffusers, or I'll just like put a spot on my pillow.
Yeah.
Or a blanket or whatever. But
you start your day off early, for one. So you're waking up earlier than probably, at least an hour to an hour and a half earlier than probably 50 to 60% of people, because most people do 9 to 5. So you're giving yourself that extra piece of the day. You're starting off with exercise. You're getting these hormones going. You're getting in a good sweat. You're activating your acuity more, versus waking up later in the day and then kind of just getting dressed, brushing teeth, and slothily going on to the rest of the day. And then later on at nighttime, instead of you staying up with these images, you might just go to sleep earlier, spend your time in prayer, which prayer typically means contemplating who you are, what are you doing? What is the thought going by?
Yep.
You're practicing self-awareness. On a psychological level, you're practicing self-awareness, which is always going to be more useful. Any millionaire out there will tell you that an important element to success and how you have to work towards what you want, you have to self-imagine, you have to reflect, you have to be aware, and you need to improve on where you're weak at.
Yep.
So you are like these practices that are spiritual practices. I believe it is a spiritual practice to be up before the sun. That's where the idea of the early bird gets the worm comes from. The idea of restraint from sexual desires. The desire for one to just completely indulge in all things desires-wise is probably the easiest way to self-destruction, but it is significantly the most commonly pushed idea, concept, belief, way of living that is now being told for people to aspire to do. What do you think is the reason for that, for one, and why do you think it's necessary to combat it, or to when is it okay to even indulge in that?
And like
just self-indulgence and desire and personal gratification.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's okay. It's okay more than we think. What is the more I become like Christ, the more I think like him. And so when I'm operating out of that mental sector, like I want a muffin, like I'm gonna go get a muffin. Like that is where it becomes harmful, when it's like I do. But when you put on the mind of Christ and the armor of Christ, that we read in Ephesians, you become like the Lord. And so what did the Lord want? And when he was tired and hungry, he wanted to go to his Father, and that was his food. It was just what filled him. What do I do when I am standing in front of people who are mad because I think something different? I need to operate differently than someone who can just, if I'm operating from who I am, then I'm gonna be mad and I'm gonna yell and I'm gonna show everything except the love of Christ. But when I become like him, I slow down. I make myself look smaller, so I'm not an authoritative figure. Not that I'm very big to begin with. I'm a little bit taller, but like my tone will change, my heart posture towards them will change, and so like I want a muffin. Lord, am I fasting today? No. Go get a muffin. I think we overdo it sometimes. Like I don't need to spend $700 on a PS5 or whatever, how much they cost, that I'm gonna watch Netflix on, and that's it, or YouTube. Like I don't need it. Or if I'm just gonna play a game and never preach the gospel to someone on that game, and I don't want that to become an excuse either for something like, oh, I can justify $700 spent because I'll just preach the gospel to them. But did the Lord, is that how he wants to use you? So I think it's a weird tension we live in when, and this is not like, don't make this religious duty, make this like being with God,
Yeah. And I think that idea of don't make it religious duty, make it be with God, that's a tension that I think a lot of people, even in the Christian world, we definitely feel that. That's kind of our version of like, oh, we need to be working 80 hours. That's our version of hustle culture. What is our religious duty? And I think you said it really well in that there's a difference between doing something because you feel like you have to in your faith versus doing something because you feel like it brings you closer to God and it allows you to hear his will more and feel like you're walking in that will more. That different perspective, it can achieve the same thing, but the heart posture behind it.
Both get you a muffin.
Yeah.
But one is because my desires are greater than anything else, and one is because this is like I get to, this is part of joy. Like this is part of me, like, thank you, Lord, that I get to have this muffin and enjoy it. Is there someone you want me to meet at this coffee shop while I'm getting a muffin? There's so much more to it, I think, than just, I want it, I got it,
For the person that wouldn't have that ability to stop and think to the Lord, like, what is their tool when they need to stop and slow down and consider, or they want to pick up a new habit that could be good for them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think I do this every day of my life too. Like, I'm thinking of someone more of like, okay, this is how we consume food. Like, hey, you want to go out to get tacos with fries? Which probably is the best combination ever. Or do you want to go get pizza with extra cheese? A way to, like, if I want to bring in new habits in my life, like, what is the scale saying? Do I need this, want this? Do I need this, or do I want this? Or what does my blood pressure say? Like, so, and here's how you bring in new habits into your life. You first break the old habit, and then you replace it with the new habit. Like, what the issue is we don't. It's not that we don't have enough time in the day, because you and I get the same amount of seconds, minutes, and hours in the day. How do we manage it? So, because I know I'm good at creative work in the morning, my early morning, being up at 5:30 is better, because my prayer is more. It is more like, Lord, this is what I'm feeling today. This is how I felt yesterday. Like, I am more mentally aware now. And so it takes 40 days to break a habit. And right now I'm not on social media, and I haven't been on for probably, at this point, it's probably 27 days. Because I wanted to break that habit of, and this is not even spiritual at all. It was taking up too much time, and I can't be scrolling on Instagram anymore. And there's some other things, like, it doesn't feel like this is adding a whole lot to my life. So I'm breaking the habit by not being on it for 40 days, which, 40 is a biblical number. 40 is a year of 40 years in the wilderness, 40 days when Jesus was fasting, which is probably the most you can go without eating food.
It's often attached to some type of tribulation a person will go to. Yeah, so
tribulation and testing of the faith, testing of your mind. In this case, for the non-believer, can I go 40 days without eating French fries or any fried food or anything that is like soda? Which, yes, you can, but you're going to have to eliminate soda from your life for 40 days. And what are you going to have to replace it with? Water, or some sort of healthy alternative with not 50 grams of sugar. So it's literally breaking a new habit is getting rid of it and then replacing it with something.
Yeah. There's a book I read, The Power of Habit. Yeah. And it talks about exactly that. 40 is right in that number, and it's breaking it, replacing it with something else, and then a major part of it, because what would happen is people would develop a new habit, but then they would have a trigger event occur.
Yes.
A stress event.
Withdrawal. Yeah.
Yeah. Not even withdrawal. This is like they're clear of it. Maybe they've been clear for like 2 years, something like that.
Okay.
But there would be a trigger event, and this trigger event would put them in a state that they hadn't been forced to deal with in that 2 years or 5 years. Or maybe they had just been removed from dealing with it.
I gotcha.
And so as they went through this event, their inclination was, what was my comfort thing in the past? Oh, it was this, bam, and then they're back on the bandwagon of that thing. This happens all the times with smokers and drinkers. Yep. And so in the book, it says that you need to figure out, so there is that break part, but then what is your backup plan, essentially? What are you going to do
when I feel like I'm relapsing, or
yes,
it's a new experience from this?
Exactly. So then it comes to be, okay, well, what's the backup plan? What's your system? Like either it's going to be like I'm stressed right now, and typically the backup plan was some action that was directly unrelated. Like, let's say if a person had an inclination to drink, maybe their backup plan would be to go and just run like 5 miles.
Or be with a accountability partner or something. I don't know.
That would be, that's like the big thing. And so if you have any, what do you think can be some like strong, productive, good backup plan things that a person can do instead of them falling back into their thing as a non-believer?
Yeah.
What can their thing be?
Yeah. I think when the mind runs rampant, move your body around. Get yourself out of that place, that room, and take a walk outside. Don't let your mind spiral into harmful thinking or self-harm, like oh man, like I'm relapsing into this, or like I'm falling back into, or like I'm even like thinking about this stressor that it's producing. Just get out the room, go take a walk. I know it's very common amongst people who watch adult films. When you're in bed, put your phone and charge it on the other side of the room. I don't know. Or like when you wake up and that's your first thing on your mind, get up. Don't stay in bed. There's literally so there's evidence that like when you're upright in a position, that you are more stimulated, that you're actually able to, you're more motivated to go and do something. I mean, think about like if we were to be laying down, we'd be asleep by now.
Facts.
And that's just what the body thinks. Like you're not, when you're laying down, your body thinks it's time to de-stimulate the mind and send either melatonin or whatever the other chemicals that it takes to put your body asleep. But now that we're upright, like we're astute and we're ready. So just get moving. Yeah. That's really all I have. I think that's, if not my only advice, really. That's all I've learned so far.
I definitely would agree that movement is it's a big portion of it. And I would even probably say that the act of, for example, going back to smoking, or the act of going back to a drink, like though the reason that those actions are the go-to things is because that action and then the feeling of relief is what the brain goes back to. Because if those things are done in moments of challenge, then we remember pain, we remember challenge, we remember strife way more than we remember the happy things, the good things. We could have a week of great things and only recall maybe one or two of them. But if we have one bad, annoying conversation or event occur, that will stand out heads and shoulders above all of the good things that we had. And we can tell that story for weeks and weeks to come. And so doing something and having some alternative definitely is going to be something that is a big thing. So exercise, you say that that's something that you can do, some type of physical activity.
Most definitely.
I was having a conversation with Jacob and Pastor Kevin, and something that Pastor Kevin recommended was a practice he takes on is having six people, like ride or dies,
community. Yeah.
Definitely, like just being a guy that has access to some type of community, whether it's work buddies, whether it's hot people that you're in leagues with, those things are going to be super big. But having community is great, but if you don't utilize it ever, if that's not a practice to reach out, to your bros and to like allow yourself that vulnerability, to be able to do that with them, like you're gonna find yourself kind of up a creek.
Yeah.
And so, what are your thoughts on guy culture and like how guys talk to each other on like certain matters, and like when you consider it from your perspective, from even your personal life, do you think that we as guys have figured out ways to keep it real and have fun, but also to have this thought of like, oh yeah, I can come to this guy about this?
Yeah, I think that's pretty healthy too. There needs to be a good balance between me and my fellow brothers to have fun. Like, I don't want to be friends with someone I'm not gonna have fun with,
Right.
But I also need to know that when I'm struggling, they have encouragement or exhortation or wisdom to offer me. So I think there's a healthy balance of each. And I think the more that you grow close to them, the more you figure out time and place for them and where they are best at, best to be used and best to be like I know some people are naturally just a little bit more like the jokester and
Mm-hmm.
So but there also could be like the same type of person who's a little bit more secluded, but when you have a struggle or a need, they're so equipped to help you. So there's a balance for sure. And
yeah.
I don't know if I don't say there's a percentage, like I don't think it's 50-50. I just think it's as it happens.
To be a good brother to someone, what are 3 ways that we as guys can be empathetic, and make it so that we can create that place where our brother can come to us?
Yeah. Well, you got to know them first. If you don't know them, I don't think there's a whole lot you really could do for them. Because the more you know them, the less it feels like that they're a project. So secondly, I'd say if you were to know, I guess this kind of ties in with how well you know them, but if I know that you're a little bit more of like someone who likes to be comforted with encouragement of words or gifts, understanding how they kind of receive and give love, I think that's really important. They could be different. I love words of affirmation, I like giving that too. But I know some people are like, they love words of affirmation, but they love when they're, in a time of stress. They like Pokemon cards or something. I don't know. They like gifts.
Right.
So, and then I would say maybe one more thing is that we need to. When was the last time that you asked him if you were being a good brother? I think that's a really important question to ask. Hey, how can I be better, friend in Christ to you?
And for somebody that's a
non-believer,
yeah.
Hey, how can I be a better friend? I just use in Christ.
So real quick, just so they have this in a quick YouTube short. What's the 3 ways?
Hey, totally. Know your friends, know what they like, know what it is that they enjoy, know how they like to give and receive love, and then figure out ways that you can be a better friend to them.
Man, that last one there, that is something that I don't know if that's something that anybody does.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird question. Like, hey, Devahntau, how can I be a better friend to you? Like, I know it sounds like a little bit weird. It's like, but it's like, I care about you so much. Like, how can I be a better friend to you?
Yeah, and it's almost so like different. Like people wouldn't even know how to answer that at first. That's something that somebody would hear.
Usually don't.
And they'd be like, dude, I don't know right now.
Like, I don't know, give me $5. And then they'd play it off as a joke, you know? So.
Yeah, exactly. And so I guess then it becomes like, now this could be an important one. How do we as guys receive a brother taking these 3 steps? Especially that last one.
Just as you would want to. I think that's my answer. Just as you would want to. Do I want someone coming up to me, yelling and be like, "Dude, you're such a good friend, bro." I'm like, "Okay, thanks. I appreciate it." Like that's words of affirmation, but I don't think I like it in that form. I think I like it in a different setting. So I mean, if you like it, then see if that works for them too. And I think the more you know, then the more you'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's kind of where that know your friends, and then that how can I be a better friend for you, that kind of comes into play. You got to communicate in that style to that person. Man, that could be big right there.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel like I have deep and beautiful friendships with my friends, but I hope they think the same too.
Okay.
I will say my parking meter, I'm looking at your clock, and my parking meter is about to be up, so.
I know, right? I was thinking about that too. Where are we at here? Oh, snap. Well, we've been going for, this has been almost a solid 2 hours.
Is this going to be a 2-parter?
Oh man, this might be a solid 3-parter.
Okay, I hear you.
Maybe 2-parter. I might start making them longer. So out of all of this, I mean, we've had a lot of conversation about spiritual formation, about habits, about communication, about all kinds of things. In this broad range, if you were to leave the audience with something, the top 3 things, what would you want to impart to them?
I would definitely say learn the heart of our Father in heaven. I think that's the biggest one, especially for me. Don't look to things of this world, but look to seek the mind of Christ. And if you've never done that before, then what a foreign feeling you'll have, but keep pressing into it. Second thing is, look not to your pride, because pride goes before the fall. But walk humbly, and I might even add, as Scripture does, walk humbly in the Spirit. Don't be self-seeking. Think about where you're getting where you're consuming things, who you're consuming things from, and how am I obtaining this money, as we talked about earlier. And the third one would be love your neighbor as you love yourself. And essentially those are the 2 commandments like Jesus gave in the Gospels. But love covers a multitude of wrongs, and if we kind of rework the way that in which we think love is now, like love is not always active. Sometimes it is just passive work, and sometimes it's slow work. But love always wins. So those are my 3 things.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thank you so much, Pickle. This has been a bomb interview, my man.
Thank you.
And for those of you guys watching, listening, this has been Devahntau Colonel with you.
Yeah, boy.
Kaleb, Pickle.
Yeah, boy.
And overall, over everything, I hope you guys were just able to get as much from this as you possibly could.
Me too.
And I just thank you guys for that time that you spent to listen to something this long, maybe in different parts. So thank you for that time. And before we officially close it out, this is something completely new doing with the show now.
Let's do it.
Mr. Kaleb Pickle, what is something in life right now that I myself and the audience can pray for you over?
Yeah. Thanks for asking the question. I at a lot of school right now, trying to figure out what exactly I want to do with my degree as well. So it's a little overwhelming being a college student and, being alive, I guess, too. So that will do.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll pray for that. Shall we go ahead and close out real quick?
Yeah, how do you close out? Did you just say peace out or what?
Oh, no, I was going to pray for you real quick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. I'll do this real quick.
Yeah, man.
Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time, being able to have another awesome episode of the podcast. Thank you for allowing Kaleb to arrive here safely with myself, and for this room to be available to each of us. And we just pray that as we go about this day, we're able to walk in your will, carry out the things you have for us, be successful, and be prosperous in them, all to your glory. And we just pray that we're able to spread you to everyone that we might encounter, and that we can be something of a light to them and be able to help them see you and find you more. All these things we give you so much thanks and praise for. In Jesus' name, amen.
Sweet. Now we close out.
Now we close out. Thank you guys for watching the Inspired Challenge Podcast.
Yeah, boy.